Hi, I'm Matoof Khan, a novelist and a screenwriter. I aspire to become a writer at the age of 22, and before which I did not have a background of art schooling and from a family of businessmen. It came as a surprise to a lot of people how and why I'm decided to get into this. However, what started as a journal entry then further transitioned into me writing a story. And I think it's been 7 years now. I haven't stopped. I have constantly been at it since the past 7 years. So, yes. So, I have always been drawn to the English language, but literature, I wasn't intrigued by it. I don't know if it was the teachers or what it was, but I would consider works of Shakespeare, even poetry by Wordsworth and other writers to be a bore. And somehow I would just struggle to get the grades to pass the subject. And my English was pretty broken till I think till actually the time I picked up the written art, since I aspire to become a writer. However, it was Stephen King that made me believe in the power of language. Because I remember the first book I read of his was It. And the 1400 pages of that book, he got me lost into the world of Terry, Maine. And I was dazzled to an extent where I wanted to create a world of my own. And the further 10 books that I read were only of Stephen King. What's amazing is that it was a language he used. It was not something which was extravagant, but it was something simple, and I got uh, submerged into those stories that he was narrating. And then I read the body of work of J.D. Salinger, an American writer. He has only four published works. Three are novels, and no, actually, one's a novel, one's a novelette, and one is another novelette, and one is a collection of short stories. So it was the work of J.D. Salinger that made me want to write a story of my own. So you can say Stephen King was the inspiration, and J.D. Salinger was the motivation that I needed to write my first story. I wrote my first book at the age of 23, and I realized that I finished that book in like about 3 weeks, 44,000 words. I wasn't comfortable to publish that book because it was a little too revealing. And it was in a manner that all the toxic emotions that were there inside me, hurt, rage, anything reclining to the negative, it just spilled on paper. And that draft was resembling reading like a toxic wasteland because it was angry. And so I decided to shelve that book. And somewhere, say probably about 6 months later, I got in touch with my publisher. We guys were introduced to each other, and that's when I started writing Cierre Closure. And we released this book in March 2017. So on paper, that's my first book. However, it's still not the first story that I wrote. So, Cierre, like it goes, closure. I mean, so the idea of closure for me is very important because over the years, I remember I was anchoring myself and not trying to meet my potential by having these certain thoughts control me, have certain relationships which had already passed, but I was still not ready to get over those relationships. Having those relationships anchor my growth. So it was through this book, Cierre Closure, that I was able to find satisfying closures to certain chapters in my life. and the idea of it was idea of a closure for me is a new beginning, a fresh beginning, and to get to that you need to, like, have the fade to black moment where you just end everything with things that were holding you back. And then on the other hand is Untamed, which on a very ordinary note means something that you cannot control. And Untamed for me is not the character Arham Sheikh that I created, who is a part of me. But Untamed for me is the thing that I capture in this book is the emotions. Like, there are certain emotions that we do not have control over. Like, if you try to avoid yourself from doing a certain thing, you could probably try for about a week, 10 days, but the 11th day impulsively you just end up giving into that particular emotions because you've been trying so hard. I mean, I may be wrong, but that's how it's been for me for a very long time, that there are certain emotions that I cannot control, like the emotions of love. Anger could be controlled. I don't let things reach. Hate, sadness, well, it is a part of life. But how you cope with sadness is up to you. But there are emotions which end up being reflected in your behavior. So, Untamed. Okay, so firstly, my name is a little unique. It's like I have not met another Matoof. That is the most funny part of it all. However, there came a period when I was like struggling to come up with these names which do not sound repetitive. Then there are times when I'm watching a movie and a name resonates with me, and I probably go like, I'm gonna sit down and work on the story eventually. Maybe I'll use this name for a character at that time. Or it goes like I am watching a movie or a certain video at night and I come across a name of a certain character in that particular video, and I'm like, okay, this name is pretty good. And the next morning when I'm introducing another character, I just use that name. So it's something that's not pre-planned, I guess, and I feel that's the fun about it, right? Because you just get a name, it just clicks into your head and you just end up committing to it. But there have been times when I've actually erased it. Cierre was my introduction to the written art, where there are many writers, poets, they're trying to leave their signature marks, that have their individual voices heard, have their individual styles recognized in this huge community. And how does one stand out? I was not rushing into having my voice heard. I knew Cierre was going to be the first piece of fiction that's going to be out there for people to know that yes, there is a novelist named Matoof Khan outside. But the book that was going to follow, it has to be more impactful. And comes Untamed, which basically is more raw and a more authoritative voice, because it has been 4 years since the release of my debut novel, and now Untamed is released just on the 1st of April. I have grown as a writer, and I see that with the narratives that I've been writing, and they have become more easy and more smooth flowing lately. Cierre paved way for Untamed. And people who read the book, people who've read Cierre, they actually came up to me and they just gave me these reviews saying that it doesn't feel like it's your debut novel. and that gave me the confidence to go ahead with with a story like Untamed, which is more extreme. By which I mean to say is more emotional, and it just made it easy for me to write that story after having the backup of my publisher, Sanchit from Pepperscript. Pepperscript are the people who have published this book as well as Cierre. Having a backup, having the faith of my publisher was like the best thing that could happen to me, because working with them, it just gives me the confidence to try and attempt subjects which a person on an ordinary basis would try to run away from. And I talk about I'm creatively profane. I talk about unconventional stuff. I talk about drug abuse, alcohol abuse. There are chapters of sexual indulgence. So having a publisher telling me to go ahead and write about what you want to write about, leaving my creative liberty in my hand, no matter how much time I took to write this story, it was an experience in its own. And now the most interesting thing that happened was that was just the start of it. Then came down to the editing process, where the editor came on board and they got at par with the story that I was trying to put across. She wanted to, she could identify with my voice and keeping the initial structure the way it is. And I feel I had the opportunity to work with the right people. And maybe working with Pepperscript is the best decision I've made till now. That's my second novel, Untamed, which released on 1st of April. And I've written this in Untamed, where I do not want a reader to merely just read a story, because this has been a journey of mine. And I want to narrate a story to my reader. They're two very, very different things for me. In that particular moment when a reader has a book in his hand, which is coming from the mind of a novelist or an author like me, inspirations might be very different. The original story might be very different of the artist, and the original story of the reader, backstory of the reader, is going to be very different. So it is through this that I get to connect with my reader. It becomes a medium for our stories to interact with each other. And when a reader he's got this book in his hand and going through my narration of what resides in me, in that moment of coalescence, stories become grander. And even if it's for that particular moment, that particular interaction of the reader grasping the words that are there on paper, that moment for me is truly magical, because I get to teleport myself into the mind, the soul, or the heart of my reader. And I respect this art a little too much to, for lack of a better word, fuck with my reader's mind, because I'm a reader first and before I'm a writer. And I use the ideology whenever I'm asked, I actually say that out loud whenever I'm asked that, why do you write whatever you write about? And I write stories that excite me. So I'm a reader first and then I'm a writer. And 7 years, it took me 7 years to understand this thing, that whatever piece of work there is, whatever music that you're listening to, whatever movie that you're listening to, it is in fact an interaction of two stories, not just merely the medium through which the art is being conveyed through by the artist. And I feel that is by far one of my most if the word is surprising learnings, I think it's by far one of the most beautiful learnings of mine as an artist. My narratives and books are not going to change the world or the way people think. The only thing that it is going to change and make a life worth living is mine. And I write stories with that intention. I will continue to write stories with that intention, not bring out a certain message in a certain individual or community, or have my story based on a particular theme. I write about characters that feel real to me, characters who I feel I could associate myself to, characters who I feel who I could relate to first and then bring it out in front of my reader. If I'm working on a certain theme, it just basically limits my creative liberty because I'm going to be restricted to a point where, okay, this is what I want the reader to know. It just makes the entire thought process, it just makes the entire drafting process very, it just doesn't make it fluid for me. Because when I'm sitting in front of the laptop, I'm just having a good time. And if, even though I monetize my passion, even though I make sure that I have my readers are going to be, reading this book, and everything that will be following is just going to be a bonus, even though all of that is a part of the puzzle, but it is not the primary driving force. The primary driving force is my satisfaction. A story that is going to make me fucking excited. And I have been, if somebody is going to be judging my book, judging my career as a writer as just a person who has published 2 books, well, it's fair enough, I'm still at the start. But if somebody sees me as a person who's probably spent about at least 10,000 hours, feeding the written art, being constant at this practice, maybe I think I know what I'm talking about, right? And the rest of it is just a bonus, because when a person is constantly at doing what they love, living and breathing the art, it becomes a survival mechanism. And when it's a survival mechanism for me, I will be very selfish to feel that, okay, maybe I wake up in the morning and I'm going to write something which is going to appeal to me. And I hope the reader comes on board and tries to get on this celebration of my life through my art. If they do, well and good. If they don't, I'll write another story. Yes, I read all the book reviews. And I feel that if somebody puts in a positive word about my work, it's just a bonus for the efforts and the time that I've put in, because it is still the motivation for me to go on and writing better stories. But what comes first is my satisfaction of writing that particular story, the process of writing. Then, if there is a bad review, I feel that, well, at least the person read my book and had the audacity to, add to my remuneration. Because for me, there is no good art or bad art. There's no good artist or bad artist. There is an artist whose work you relate to, and there's an artist whose work you feel disconnected to. So, good or bad reviews, I will still go on writing, because this is what I do now. Nothing. I believe that everything happens for the benefit of me, and there's a specific time for something to happen. Like, for instance, if I have picked up a certain habit at a younger age, it was appropriate for me at that time, because at that time it is up to me to decide whether if this habit is worth prioritizing in my life, or if it's a habit that I need to let go. Then comes the point where every person who enters my life is very important for that particular moment, because uh, now when I talk about a certain romance gone wrong, when I talk about a certain friend coming in my life and leaving, or any hindrances with a family member for during a particular moment, I feel it is very important to acknowledge the fact that it was just fine at that time, because the sooner I accept it, the sooner I'll be able to acknowledge the fact that it's past. What's there is this right now. So what I feel is that if I were to have approached things differently as a kid, teenager, up until young adulthood, maybe things would have been differently. I don't want to believe in that. Because Untamed wouldn't have turned out the way it has turned out right now. Uh, if I wouldn't have fumbled upon the written art, if I wouldn't have started this thing as a journal entry, and then further one morning deciding to write a story and just constantly, if it would have been like me picking up the knack of storytelling at a very younger age, going to art school, getting a professional degree, and then coming down to writing Untamed, the purpose of this book would have been very different. The book wouldn't have felt the way it feels for me right now, because it's an expression. It is a story where I have come to terms with my truth and acknowledge what's past, and knowing the fact that I can like constantly be living in the past where, okay, maybe this could have been this way, or I feel everything just took its course the way it was supposed to, and I'm glad it did. I'm really grateful that it did in the manner it did. So wow, I think I scared the pigeons. Wow. Firstly, I'm not. I don't feel like I am the authority to give tips to aspiring writers, because there's a certain process that worked for me, and I came to understanding the process after failing. I don't know for how many years, and I believe that once a person gets on this road, they create their own ways of approaching the art, and it becomes more natural and sticks for a longer period of time. With that said, what I can bring about, what I can tell, is the struggles that I faced, and I believe when I wrote Cierre, I had the plot in mind, but I did not know my character too well. And I started getting under the skin of my character as the story unfolds. I'm like, oh wow, probably this is what Aryan Ahmed could do. Probably this is what I would do if I was Aryan Ahmed. And then comes Untamed, where eventually I knew what character I wanted to write about, but what story was he going to get on? So I followed with him just behaving in a manner I feel that I would behave during the transition of the chapters. And with all the hooks attached, I had an entire story to work with. So the processes for Cierre and Untamed, they were very different. So I feel that you need to allow the story to surprise you. Trust the story, have faith in it, because generally when a person is working on the first draft, they have a tendency to keep going back and editing, and that is a mistake I did with Cierre, because I could have completed that story very soon, but it just took time because I was constantly going back and editing the first draft. But the idea of the first draft is like you expressing whatever's there inside of you, just get it out on paper and then start again. Because if, for instance, I type chapter 5 and now I go down to chapter 6 and be like, oh shit, I can work on chapter 5 again and then get back to 6. And then when you're in chapter 5, you're like, okay, I can do this edit in chapter 4, but still your story is stuck at chapter 6. It will take a lot of time for it to proceed. I mean, the chapter 5 is a little inadequate. Finish chapter 6, go to 7, go to 8, go to 9, 10, come back to chapter 1, rework on that thing. Because I know we all are here to impress our publishers. I want to impress my publisher to an extent that he approves my first draft. But when my publisher tells me that the first draft is not as per his liking, aka when the publisher tells me that the first draft is trash, I believe that it is trash. So what I do, I take the trash and I put it in the bin. And when the trash is in the bin, I start working again, knowing that I do not need to make it in this manner. If it's trash again, I go back making sure that it is not the same trash that I'm working on up until the point I become better at it. I learned that way. And I feel one must learn in that manner because that is the manner that sticks. Because now when I get down to writing a story, I'm smart about it. I know what is the character that is going to be appealing to me and what is the character that is going to be more defined at the end of it. So all of this came with practice through the years, and I feel that I've deleted so many drafts that I've got almost 300,000 words of unused material kept with me, which I could just pick up whenever I want and just start polishing. I go for karaoke very often, and I love to sing songs by my favorite bands. I may not be good at it, but it's at the end of the song there's a certain rush. I mean, it's not for the people present to understand it till the time they go ahead and sing or probably get that particular rush in whichever fashion. It's not so they wouldn't really understand why I'm doing it. I think one can use the analogy for life in general, because to understand why a certain person is doing a certain something, you need to try to experience what the person is experiencing to just know why the hell the person is doing whatever they're doing. So yeah, I love singing at karaoke. My favorite bands are AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, and Aerosmith.